Welcome back, 8th graders. This is lesson 4 of module 7, solve systems by elimination. So you've done solving systems by graphing, and then in lesson 3, solve systems by substitution. Now solve systems by elimination. You may or may not have done something like this before, so we'll just kind of get started and see how it is. So the I can statement says, I can solve a system of linear equations by elimination and check my solution. So the Spark Your Learning says, a football team is selling pennants and shirts. One fan bought 6 shirts and 2 pennants for $114. Later, the fan returned 4 shirts and 2 pennants for $84. How could you use an operation with equations to determine the price for each shirt and each pennant? So they give you some ideas for tools. You might want to draw a graph. I would say it might be good to try to write a couple of different equations so you have a system. Think about what variables you would use, what's the total cost for each equation. Just kind of do what you just try different ways to try to solve it and figure out how much it is for each shirt and each pennant. Then try to do the turn and talk. If the fan only returned 1 shirt and 1 pennant, would you still be able to determine the price for each shirt and each pennant using the same method? Explain. So maybe your method works, maybe it doesn't. You could try guess and check, a lot of different possibilities. So work on that for a little bit, and then we can head to the build understanding. All right, so in the build understanding, it says you previously learned how to solve a system of equations by replacing a variable through substitution with an equivalent expression. That was just in lesson 3. Elimination is another method. It's the algebraic process of eliminating a variable in a system of equations by adding the equations together to eliminate one of the variables. So this lesson is a really great one because they go through step by step how to do this type of process, and it's really helpful. So let's look at this. It says solve the system of equations using elimination, and they're going to help you with that in all these steps. So here's your system: 3x plus 2y equals 24, and 7x minus 2y equals 36. So they first want you to look at which variable, x or y, has coefficients that sum to 0. So if you were to add the coefficients of x or the coefficients of y together, would you get 0? B, if you add the x terms together, so for example 3x and 7x, what is the result? So that goes here. C, if you add the constant terms together, what is the result? So those are the constant terms. And then here they're going to give you kind of a good way to show it, and then they have you just fill in the blanks here. Add the two equations, then solve the resulting equation. And then E, substitute the value of x. So in this process, you should get a value of x into either original equation, and then you can solve for y. So if you get x equals 2, you can go up here to this first equation, for example, and put 2 in wherever you see x, and then you can solve for y. The answer is not 2, but just in case. That's an idea. F, what is the solution as an ordered pair? So once you get x and y, then you'll have an ordered pair. G, check your solution by substituting the values into both original equations. So then go back and do both. So then do the turn and talk in task 1, this one here, that you just did, part E. Would you get a different solution if you had substituted the value of x into the other original equation? Explain. So think about that, and then we can go on to the next page. All right, so here we are in the step it out, and they say solve the system of equations, but they're going to help you go through it step by step. So they first tell you to graph the system and estimate the solution from your graph, like you did before, where you find where they intersect, and then your estimate goes here. And then in B, they say multiply the first equation by a number so that the coefficient of the x term is opposite of the coefficient of the x term in the second equation. So if you look here, they want you to multiply this whole equation, the whole thing, by some number so that your x coefficient is the opposite of 2. And so they help you do that here. And then C, add the equations and solve for y. Then in D, use the value of y to solve for x in either original equation. So they help you go through step by step, just filling in the boxes as you go. E, check that the values of x and y make both equations true, and they kind of help you do that. And so then you'll come up with your solution here in F. And then so I would pause the video there, work on number 2, and then you can go on to number 3. All right, so now that you've finished number 2, let's look at number 3. A store sells 2 blends of snack mix. The situation is represented by the system of equations shown. And one thing that I think is really cool to notice here, they use different variables besides x and y, C and P, and that kind of helps you remember as you're looking at the equations what you're talking about. You can always use x and y, but sometimes it's helpful to use variables that kind of go along with what you're talking about in your problem. So A says, is one coefficient of C a multiple of the other? Is one coefficient of P a multiple of the other? So in this one, they're going to show you what you need to do differently than you did in number 2 if you have to multiply both equations by a number to get 2 coefficients that are opposite each other. So when you look at letter B, eliminate C by multiplying the first equation by -3 and the second equation by 2. So then you can see here, by doing that, you're going to get -6 here and +6 here. So they looked at this 2 here, 3 here, and they thought, oh, I can't just multiply one equation by something to get an opposite. And so they chose this, maybe because these numbers were larger or something like that. But so just take this step by step, go through and follow the steps, fill in the blanks in each one, and then go on to C, add the equations and solve. You'll solve for P. Then go on to D, use the value of P to solve for C in either equation. And so then you can here fill in the blank. The pecans cost this much, or pecans, per pack, and the cranberries cost this much per pack. So go ahead and just take your time, go step by step through number 3. When you finish that, you can go on to the check understanding. Once you finish the check understanding, you can do the on your own on these 2 pages. And then if you feel good about how you did on the on your own, you really had no problems with it, you can skip this homework. But if you need more practice, go ahead and do any of the problems, some of the problems, all the problems, whatever would make you feel like you've got the understanding that you need. Then you can go on and do the test prep and the spiral review. So that's all for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next lesson.